Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. Former President of Nigeria, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, on Tuesday urged Nigeria's West Coast neighbor, Benin Republic, to change its ways for a harmonious bilateral relationship between the two countries. Obasanjo made the remark during a news briefing on the margins of Policy Dialogue of African Business Associations on implementing the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFC, FTA agreements in Addis Ababa. He explained that Benin's notoriety was not new, as Nigeria had for long been enduring the practice, which undermined its economic well-being. He said, in quote, "It happened when I was president of Nigeria. I called the then Benin president, Nikafor Diodon Soglo, to let us meet at any of our border posts over the issue. We eventually met at Badagry in Nigeria, where we agreed that Nigerian customs would be stationed in Benin. The Nigerian customs, are still there. We don't have issues with goods manufactured in Benin. They are welcome. But as long as Benin allows dumping of goods, there will always be a problem with Nigeria," end quote.
So well, we took this subject yesterday.
Okay, go ahead, Dr. Basi.
Yes, we took this subject yesterday, and President Obasanjo was speaking in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, at an event, a conference organized by the African Development Bank, the AU, the ECA, and Obasanjo is chairman of the CODA board, looking at the agreements under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So he was speaking in that capacity as an international statesman. He was also speaking in his capacity as former president of Nigeria and somebody who understands the issues. Now, yesterday I made a point that President Obasanjo was making a principled point, namely that whereas we're in ECOWAS, other countries that are part of that ECOWAS have a duty to respect the constitutive acts of ECOWAS, and that there are protocols that need to be respected in relation to the movement of goods and services and persons. Now, the principled point that was made by President Obasanjo is that the Republic of Benin cannot turn itself into a route for turning Nigeria into a dumping ground, for all kinds of products. He said, look, goods from Republic of Benin are welcome, but not that Republic of Benin will begin to conduct itself in a manner that will jeopardize the economic interests of Nigeria. And he pointed out that this problem is not new, and cited the example that you referred to, his meeting with Nikafor Soglo, when Nikafor Soglo was president of the Republic of Benin. But I think, one of the points I made yesterday, that as it was reported, it looked like some of the headlines were trying to make it look like an endorsement of what the federal government has done with regards to the closure of the border, particularly with Benin. And I was saying that President Obasanjo did not go that far. He stayed at the level of principle, and he recognized the fact that we have to engage the Republic of Benin to ensure that the Republic of Benin does not economically become a route of violation of the sovereign rights of Nigeria, economic rights of Nigeria. Now, the other thing we should look at is that there was once upon a time they had a president in the Republic of Benin who would come to Nigeria. I mean, he sees himself as President Obasanjo's son, and he will always say, oh, Republic of Benin is the 37th state of Nigeria. Okay, I don't want to mention names, but I'm stating something that is a fact, But I think at the same time, even if certain persons think that Republic of Benin is 37th state of Nigeria, that does not give them the right, to violate ECOWAS protocols. And President Obasanjo, lending his voice to this, is more or less saying to the Nigerian government that address this issue. But the other side of it is, how are they addressing it? So I think it's reassuring that the Minister of Finance says the closure of the border will be short and temporary, because we have seen that it's not something that is sustainable on a long term. I think it's also a good thing that the Nigerian authorities are meeting with their counterparts from Benin and Niger, and that there will be a consensus, as to how many of these things can be worked out, particularly in the light of the fact that Nigeria has signed on to the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. When that starts in real sense, and you have a 37th state next door, violating certain protocols, that could affect productivity in Nigeria, growth in Nigeria, job creation in Nigeria.
Absolutely. And the ex-president definitely made a good point here, because even yesterday on the show, when we were going through the newspaper review, we looked at this topic again, and we were discussing the possibilities of the border closure going on even beyond the deadline. And that would be a situation that honestly just wouldn't put us in the best position. So it's good to be reassured that it's going to be short and temporary. And once again, it's a double-edged sword. We've seen the benefits and we've also seen the losses. And at the end of the day, what needs to happen is the government needs some sort of review to see how we can start, or rather stop our borders from being so porous, while ensuring that we're still not necessarily also breaking any ECOWAS conventions, because closing our borders right now, our land borders, is not necessarily something that we can justify for far too long.
Yes, but I actually appreciate the explanation given by the Minister of Information. We are not the only ones breaching ECOWAS protocols. Yeah. ECOWAS protocols on transit are being breached. So I don't see why the blame is being heaped on Nigeria when we're trying to protect ourselves. It's bad enough that we subsidize our own fuel consumptions. It's completely intolerable that we subsidize the fuel consumption of our neighboring countries, which is exactly what we've been doing. This whole big brother role, as he puts it, really has to stop. And I think this is what the government is doing.
It's good to see some sort of protectionist policy finally.
It's about time.
Actually, you know, it's time for us to stand up for ourselves.
Absolutely.
To put it that way.
Now, a bronze cockerel taken by British colonial forces and donated to Jesus College, Cambridge, is to be returned to Nigeria in an unprecedented step that adds momentum to the growing repatriations movement. The okuko, described by the college as a royal ancestral heirloom, will be one of the first Benin bronzes, I'm still on the other story, to be returned to Nigeria by a major British institution since the punitive expedition in 1897, when thousands of bronzes were stolen from Benin City by British forces. No specific date for return has been released, but the college stated that the bronze cockerel belongs with the current Oba at the court of Benin. The return was recommended by Jesus College's Legacy of Slavery Working Party, a group dedicated to looking at the institution's connections to slavery, which confirmed the piece was donated in 1905 by the father of a student. So we continue to see the horrors of that colonial era and the great evil that was done in Africa. I don't want to butcher the name of the Oba of Benin at the time because I can't pronounce it. Thank you. Because I would have completely, I would have butchered that completely. And he was, you know, deposed from his throne in 1897. People were massacred. We still don't know how many people were massacred. His palace and environs were sacked. The whole city, Benin City, was destroyed by the British forces. A great crime was done. This Oba died in exile in Calabar. It's completely disgusting. So I'm actually pleased that this is coming home where it belongs. And I completely reject the argument that's advanced, unfortunately, even by some Africans, that, oh, it's fine that the colonial forces have stolen our art and our artifacts because we don't appreciate it. I think that's a really dreadful thing to say.
It is.
And the British, I have to commend, even though I've highlighted the horrific things they did, at least they are returning it, unlike France, which have returned recently the saber belonging to Omar Tal, but it's not permanent, the restoration. Well, at least not yet. Hopefully, the French Parliament will review their laws, because right now they're actually giving it to France, but the French law prohibits them returning it permanently, which is disgusting. What you stole should be returned.
Well, I think first, the movement for the restitution of cultural artifacts stolen from African countries, not just Nigeria, Senegal, Gambia, Democratic Republic of Congo, and other African countries, and also particularly Nigeria. This movement has been on for quite some time, and the advocacy has been very consistent and persistent. And I think that this latest development is welcome. They plan to return the cultural artifact, one major cultural artifact taken from Benin. And I think that, you know, one book I would like to recommend on this is the activism of two students who were president and vice president of the African Caribbean Society at the University of Cambridge, where this has now happened. It's a victory for these two young ladies, a Nigerian lady called Chelsea Kwaye, and Ore Ogunbiyi, in fact, the daughter of of Dr. Yemi Ogunbiyi, who is very well known in Nigeria. And their book is titled Taking Up Space, The Black Girls' Manifesto for Change. And, you know, they were involved in this advocacy for return of artifacts, particularly in this particular case that we have before us. And now, you know, they have planned to return the artifact. Initially in 2016, the university said they will look into the grievances of the students and other activists. And now they've taken this decision. I think it's a welcome development. President Macron is actually in support of the return of artifacts. And Senegal and Democratic Republic of Congo, they are pushing that, you know, France should return more artifacts to Africa. And in August, some 18 artifacts were returned to Ijebuland during the Oju de Oba festival. So it's something that should continue. But then preserving those returned artifacts is a major challenge for African countries.